Okay, cool. So yeah, CSS crash course, um, and then we'll play some CSS games. And again, uh, you all are like, you're the reason I'm here. So if you have questions or anything, feel free to just chime in and ask at any point. I'm here to help. So, okay, so I have VS Code open, and I'm gonna simulate what it's like to go from one assignment to the next. So I'm actually gonna go to GitHub. And remember, GitHub is the website where you're storing your code and submitting your assignments. And every time you do a lesson, it's going to be on a specific Git branch. And when you're finished with the lesson and you've turned it in, when you want to move on to the next one, this is how you start each assignment. And it does say it in the instructions for, let's see. Every assignment starts with this paragraph here. Oh, shoot, I'm not screen sharing. Oh, I am. I am. You all can see my screen, right? Okay. So yeah, this at the beginning of each lesson is telling you how to merge your pull request. So I'm just going to show you how to do that really quick to kind of simulate what it's like as a student. You're going to be on a different lesson than me right now, and your assignment might look a little different, but this part of the process is the same. So you go to merge pull request, confirm merge, and you should get this success message. So what this did is you had a separate branch that you're doing your work on, and for your last lesson, and then you merge that branch into the main branch. So now the main branch, they're kind of like two different versions of your code base. And so now you've taken the latest work that you did on the latest lesson and you merged it into the main branch. And now if we were to go back to the code tab here and have it by default will select the main branch. Now our main branch will have the latest commit, and you can actually see me. I merged pull request one from this branch. So now my main branch on GitHub has the latest changes. The next step after that is going back to your computer and in your terminal, and you can also have a terminal open. Your terminal might look different than mine, by the way, but same type of thing. You can also open a terminal in VS Code, which I like to do. You can do that up here, terminal, new terminal. Um, there's also a hotkey for it. I use a lot of hotkeys, so I'll try to explain the important ones while I'm here. But so you open a terminal, and after you've merged your pull request, now you want to git checkout main. So this switches back to the main branch on your own code base on your computer. And it might cross out some files, which that means my main branch right now on my own computer doesn't have the latest updates. So some of these files might not exist on my main branch right now. And so I'm going to pull git pull main. Oh, okay. Git pull origin main. Okay. And what that did is we had taken the branch from my lesson 5 and merged it to the main branch on GitHub. But GitHub has its own separate version of these branches and all that. And so now on my own computer, they call your own computer local and GitHub remote, just by the way. So be aware of those terms. So local, this is my computer. So my local Git repository um, is now synced with whatever's on GitHub because I did a git pull origin main. So I did a pull request. I submitted my assignment, which was the pull request. Then I merged my pull request on GitHub. And then I I went back to my computer, switched to the main branch, and then pulled from the main branch. So now my main branch on my own computer has the latest updates from that new work. And so now I'm going to make a new branch. And I know Git is a lot to learn. It's really confusing and tough. And actually, I've been making a cheat sheet, which should hopefully help clarify some of this. Uh, don't feel alone if Git is confusing for you because it's confusing for everyone. Okay, so now to start my new assignment, I'm going to say git checkout dash B, which means checkout is like a way to switch to a certain branch or a certain commit. Dash B means make a new one if it doesn't exist. And then I'm going to switch to lesson, I think we're on lesson 7, right? Uh, oh, lesson 8. Okay, so I'm switching to lesson 8. Okay, and you can usually see down here, it should say lesson 8 in VS Code, and that tells you what branch you're on. You can also, if you want to see what branch you're on, you can also do git status on branch lesson 8. So now we're on a new branch, and we can do this work for the assignment. I'm gonna do last week's assignment too, the HTML stuff. So you can press, they asked you not to do this, but you can have it autofill kind of the main HTML that most websites have a certain set of HTML tags that they all need. And it's annoying to have to write them out every time you make an HTML page because they pretty much every website needs some like what they call boilerplate, which is just like some default HTML that every website pretty much needs. So this is kind of like the setup for most. It's an easy way to set up most HTML pages. You press exclamation point and then let it autofill. So this is your boilerplate. They asked you not to do that on the assignment because they want you to learn all these tags and what they do. But for now, just to save time, I'm going to do that. I'm going to title this, I forgot what they wanted you to title it, but I'm going to say Rio's portfolio. So this title tag, this is what's going to show in actually, I might as well start my server. So for me, it's really important to see the results of my code as I'm typing. If you can't see what you're doing, then it's hard. And so I like to always have my code, like the web page visible. And just so you know, the way that I did that is you can go down here and press Start Live Server. And I started it, and so now it started, and it's this changed to tell me the port that it started on. So now this is a tab that has my portfolio, and it's nothing so far. It's just some blank HTML. And just to show you what this title did, when I change it, you can see it says Rio's portfolio up there. If I were to change this and like put an exclamation point, you can see they show up there. So the title is the title of your web page, and it shows up in the tab thing up there. Okay, so I'm just gonna autofill, or not autofill, but I'm just gonna put some like default stuff here. Um, I can put, I'll put an H1, which an H1 is a heading tag. For some reason there it is. Um, okay, I'll say Rio's portfolio. And there it shows up there. And I'll just put a couple other things. Actually, I think I have it here. So I'm gonna ignore, there was a couple other things I wanted you to do in the title. I'm gonna ignore that for now. I'm just gonna add a couple, like 1 or 2 sections here. So your name and an H1 element. So I guess I'll just do that, your name. Um, a paragraph or the word about in an H2 element. So I'll do that. H2 about a paragraph in a P element. The word experience in an H2 element. So another H2 with experience. Your listed experiences in a UL element. So a UL, just here, I'll just explain these. So H1, this is a header. Anything with like a header is always H and then a number. And they're kind of hierarchy. So H1 is like the main header of your whole page. H2 is like, the secondary header. H3 is, or yeah, that's an H2, but you can go all the way to H6. And those are just kind of like differentiating between the hierarchy of headings. Um, a P tag is a paragraph tag. So most text will go in a P tag. Um, and then we're going to do a UL. So a UL stands for unordered list. So whenever you're doing a list of things, like for example, this right here, these instructions, that is a list. It's a bunch of like elements kind of in a list. Usually you use UL, which is unordered list. There's also OL, which is ordered list. So an ordered list by default will have numbers next to it, and an unordered list will have bullet points next to it, not numbers. And I'm gonna take these instructions and I'm gonna like share the screen between my portfolio and the instructions here, so I can see both. So we're making this so my portfolio page, I'm gonna make this unordered list, which is gonna have some of my experiences. So I'm gonna say in an unordered list, you want li tags, which is a list element or list item. So unordered list and then list item. So every list, ordered lists and unordered lists all have list items in them. So I'm just gonna put some of my experiences in there. Experience can be courses you've taken, coding, tech, languages you've learned, technologies you've worked with, or other experiences. So I'm gonna put like dog walker and um, JavaScript. Um, sure. JavaScript and what's more experience? HTML and CSS. Okay. So I'm kind of building out, it's like a resume kind of. Um, Pretty impressive, I know. Okay.
Ask question,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Unordered list is something that is not in order. That what it mean, or it means something else?
Yep, that's what it means. It's not in order. So the order doesn't matter, which basically just means it puts bullet points here. Like on these items, if I zoom in here, on these items, there's bullet points there. If I were to turn this into an ordered list by making it the tag OL for ordered list, you can see now they're numbers. So that's the difference, is an ordered list or an unordered list, the order doesn't matter and they have bullet points next to it. And an ordered list, they're numbered. Um, and actually with CSS,
Thank you.
you can change those things. So you can have an unordered list without bullet points. You can take the bullet points away using CSS, or you can have an ordered list with bullet points. So with CSS, like I guess a fundamental thing to understand is that when you're making HTML, all of these tags, you can change the look of them with CSS. And what they do is they kind of just give you like a default look, and then you can change it from there. And so HTML by default, actually, each of these tags has some CSS applied to it already. And with CSS, you can kind of just go through and change it however you want. So this is kind of like the defaults. And you could make a whole web page without using different tags. Like for example, an H1 and a P tag, the main difference is that it's text that's different boldness and different size, right? So the font size for a P tag is smaller, like this hello right here. The font size for this H1 is a lot bigger and it's more bold. And you can change that using CSS. So you might think, why why use different tags in HTML when you can just change how they look in CSS? And the reason is because there's something called semantic HTML, which it's this practice of you want to use the right tag for the right thing, um, because it's better for people who, it's better for a few things to use the right tags. One is for people who are um, like blind or vision impaired. They use what's called a screen reader, which is something on their phone or computer that just reads the web page out to them. So if I were blind, I couldn't see any of this. I could just have my screen reader read out these things to me. And if you use the right tags for their meaning, then the screen reader is more effective. People can go through your page more easily. Um, so it's better for screen readers. It's better for what's called accessibility. So it's more accessible for people who are vision impaired. Um, and it's also better for SEO, search engine optimization, which I don't want to go too deep into it. If you know what it is, then cool. If you don't worry about it. It's basically just Google's way of determining what is the meaning of a web page and how they're going to put it in their search results. So like if I Google a certain page, um, Google's algorithm will know, okay, this page is about Rio, so I'm going to put that higher in the search results because it's an H1 that's displaying that. So those are some reasons why HTML tags exist and why you don't just do all the styling in CSS and use, because you could have everything be a P tag and then just select each tag individually in CSS and change the way it looks, but it's important to know for those reasons. Anyways, sorry, tangent. Um, okay, I think this is enough HTML here to get like going with CSS. So I'm going to pretend that we did all the rest of this and we can jump into the next lesson, which is the point. That's why we're here today. We're doing CSS. Um, okay, so I'm gonna and actually I'm gonna do a git commit. So I'm gonna do git add, which the process is you always do ACP, git add, git commit, git push. That's the kind of the order that you do these in. So git add, and then they tell you to put dot. They tell you to do git add dot. I usually do git add dash a. It's just a different option for git add. I like git add dash a because it will add files that are new, whereas git add dot won't register new files automatically. So I like git add dash a. So I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do git commit dash m. So I'm doing a commit now, which is like saving my work, and it's like a checkpoint, and you're naming the checkpoint or you're leaving a message for yourself so that you can see it in the future and see what you did here. And in the commit message, you generally describe the work you did. So I'm going to say add some HTML. And then I'm going to do git push. So git add, commit, push. Um, and generally when you push, if it's a new branch, which in this class, most of the time you're doing one push per branch, you're generally going to have to do -u origin and then the name of the branch. It's going to look like that. If you don't do that, you're going to get an error message which will tell you to do this. What this basically means is you don't have a branch on GitHub to match this new branch you have on your own computer. And so GitHub is going to complain and say, I don't know where you want this branch. I don't know why, but by default, GitHub doesn't want to create a new branch unless you specify you want it to create that new one. So this says, hey, GitHub, I'm sending my work to you, the website where you're storing your code. And not only that, but I want to create a new branch on GitHub, which matches the branch that I'm working on my computer. So lesson 8 is the name of the branch. Okay, and that's successful. So now on GitHub, and I could actually, you don't have to, but I'm going to show you right here. On GitHub, it says lesson 8 had a push 2 seconds ago. So normally at this point, you'd do compare and pull request and you'd submit your assignment. For right now, I'm gonna do 2 assignments in one. So I'm gonna pretend that I haven't done that work yet, and I'm just gonna go right on to the next assignment. So we're doing CSS now. Okay, so this is this week's assignment, right? Yes, this week's assignment, CSS basics. So I'm gonna create a new folder called CSS. You can right click and do new folder, or you can do this icon right here. CSS, new file called index.css. Also, if your icons and things look different, or your theme or any of those, like that's totally fine. That's just, I have a specific theme for my icons and all that. So it's not going to affect how it actually works. It's just the look and feel. Okay, so we made this new file where we're going to store our CSS styles. And then we're going to link this new file. So I'll show you how to link it. Actually, so far I've just been kind of following the lesson. I do want to like show you, because I'm doing a crash course, so I might as well show you like a little bit. I think that this is important. So CSS is the way that your web page looks. So all this HTML, these are like nouns on your web page. These are the things, the objects on your actual page. So like any web page is made up of things like content. That content is your HTML. Your CSS is like the adjective. So if HTML is a noun, CSS is an adjective. It describes the way that something looks. So far, we've only been able to put new content on our page. Now we want to change how it looks. And so that's what CSS is for. It's for styling. And it stands for Cascading Style Sheet. And so there's 3 different ways to add CSS styles. So I'll show you all 3. So the most simple way is you can, on any HTML tag, you can add something inside the tag called style, like that. And then you can say equals, and then set some styles in here. You can say, which this is now some CSS that I'm writing. I can do font size, and I can do like something crazy. Let's do 800 pixels. And I save. So now it has this line right here. This is inline CSS. And let's see. Oh, is it broken? I might have broken it. Oh, nope, I didn't break it. It's just really big. So that's some 800 point text right there. I was also zoomed in, but okay, so let's make it down to something like, let's try 80. Okay. And then I like to split screen. If you have a big enough screen to do it, it's nice to split screen so that you can actually see. So now I can change this to like 20 and boom, you can see the changes you're making. I really would encourage you when you're working on CSS or anything, try to have your web page open so that you can see, the results of what you're writing. Um, Otherwise, you might be doing a bunch of stuff that might be breaking things, or it might not be doing what you want it to, and you're not going to know until later. So try to always, if you can, have some visual where you can see the result of your code. Um, if you don't have a big enough screen, sometimes what I'll do, like if I'm just working on my laptop, what I'll do is I'll have these things both full screened. I'll have my code editor and my web page where it's showing full screen, but I'll switch back and forth. And the way that I switch back and forth is Command Tab. Those are keys on your keyboard. Command Tab, it's a hotkey. Um, and what it does is it opens this like app switcher, which for me it's showing up um, on my other screen, so you can't see it. But yeah, Command Tab opens up an app switcher and it allows you to easily switch between apps. So that's what I would recommend if you want to switch between two apps really easily. Um, it's just important to be able to see what you're doing. Okay, another tangent, but oh, a question from Marvin.
Yes, real questions. Sorry, the interruption. I cannot find the
Oh,
server
I'm
that you
sorry.
mentioned that you have
If
it
you're
on
on
the
a
bottom.
Windows, it's Alt Tab.
I have a Mac.
A Mac? Oh,
Yeah,
and so you've tried pressing Command and then Tab.
Command tab. Okay.
So the normal way to do it is you would press Command and then hold Command and then press Tab, but keep holding Command. Um, it'll pull up an app switcher. I can't seem to. It's showing up on my other computer. I don't know how to make it show up on my main one, but um, if that's just an extra credit, so don't worry about it. If you can also look it up.
Okay.
Command Tab Mac. I'm sure there'll be some videos of people, yeah, using it. It's my favorite hotkey, so it's worth taking the detour to show you because it's so good. Let's watch this guy. So he's pressing Command with his thumb and then hitting Tab with his other finger. See if he shows his screen. He's not. Okay, never mind. I don't want to get too carried away with that, but that is a good way to switch between apps really easily. I've done a whole lesson before on using your computer quickly. That's just a one tip, but okay. So back to it. So this is the first way to add styles to your site. You can add a style to any tag by hitting or by typing style, and I could do color, red. Now my about is red. So that's one way to do it. And rely on your autocomplete. If you're using VS Code, you should be getting some good autocomplete in here. So when you want to learn a new style, there's a good chance there's a name for it. Like if I wanted to add a background color to this text right here about, I could try typing background color and I know, but you might not. And now you know, you started typing background color and there it shows up. So it actually tells you right there what it does. Sets the background color of an element. So this is your autocomplete helping you out. Um, and you can also use, yeah, when you pick a color, you can also use like this color picker. If you hover over one of those, it'll show up a little color picker and you can change the color picker color. Um, so anyways, it's looking really bad, but that's okay. That's part of learning CSS is you're probably going to have your website look really bad for a bit, and you're going to learn how to make it look better with time. Um, I'll try to get you part of the way there, but there's a lot to learn. Um, okay, so that's one way to add styles, and that's called inline styles. Um, let me add a note in my README maybe. Where's my README? Okay. Ways to add CSS inline. Okay, so that's the first way, inline styles. And that looks like this. You add style to an individual tag. The other way is, or one other way is using a CSS. I rarely ever use this way, so I forget how you even do it. You add a style tag. Yeah, so you add a style tag. Now in this style tag, I can actually I can select any of these elements in here and add some CSS in here to change those elements. So there's kind of two crucial things about CSS. When you're writing CSS, unless you're doing an inline tag, which in an inline tag, you have like the thing that you're changing and then the value of it. So font size, 80 pixels. That's how all CSS is. You have, the thing that you want to change and then the value that you're changing it to. But when you're not defining your style on the actual tag itself, you need a way to select that tag that you want to change. Otherwise, you're going to affect all the tags. So you want, in CSS, there's this really important concept, which is your selectors. So you're trying to select certain elements on your page, and there's a few ways to do it. So the first way is, so this is actual CSS I'm writing in here. So this is H1. Is this how to do it? I might be doing this wrong. Let's see. Let's try it. We'll find out. Or color. Yeah, I think this is right. Green. Yeah. Okay. So you see my name changed to green there. In this style tag, I added a selector. So you write the name of the tag that you want to change, and then open and closing brackets, and then the actual CSS styles. So I could add multiple in here. I could do color green and font weight. It's probably already bold. I could do bolder. Doesn't seem to be doing anything. You could do font style italic. You can see it's italic now. So this is another way of doing CSS. This is called, I think it's called style tag internal. Yeah, internal. So it's internal because it's inside the HTML. So in the HTML, I have a style tag and then my CSS in there. Now, there's one more way to do it, which is the way that you're pretty much always going to do it once you learn it. And it's how you're going to do it today. You add a new file, and then you can add all your CSS in this file. So this is now our new CSS file. And now I can add a selector in here. So same syntax, H2, color, red. And one thing is it's probably not going to show up. So we can see these are our H2s, about an experience. They're not red. The reason is because we need to link to that file. So there's one more thing we need to do to link an external style sheet. You add it's a link tag, right? Yeah, a link tag. And I'm letting it autofill. Basically, it needs to be a tag called link. It has an attribute called rel, which is the relation. So what is the relation? It's a style sheet. What is the hypertext reference? href. It is ./css/index.css. You can also put just css/index.css. This is basically the file structure. So you have a folder. So we're specifying the CSS folder. And then folders are separated by slashes. and files in the folders are also separated by slashes. So this is what's called a path name. The // indicates we're specifically talking about the folder that I'm in right here, where the index.html file is. So basically, file paths are something you're going to get wrong a lot, but you're going to eventually learn and get comfortable with. But it's important to get this right. If it's not, if your styles aren't showing up. So now we can see like we have our things showing up as red here. That means our style sheet is correctly linked because I, in my style sheet, specified color red. If that was not working, like if I misspelled this, if I did CS, that ruins it. So the link is broken. It's not working anymore. So make sure to get this right. If your styles aren't showing up, then you probably got this part wrong. And you also want to make sure that you have this same folder structure. It's a folder called CSS and a file in it called index.css. Okay, so that's the last way to do styles is an external style sheet. Okay. That's kind of all the basic setup. So now if you want, we can take a breather and then we can come back and actually do like some real deep CSS work. I'll pause and ask like, how are you all feeling? If you have any questions, this is making sense. Good. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to delete the examples for this is the other way to do it, which we're not doing. We're also not going to do this one for the homework assignment. The only way that we're adding CSS for your homework assignment is through adding this link tag and then making a separate file for your CSS. So now we can put all of our CSS in here. Okay, and now we can actually get like get into it. So let's pull up the assignment again and so they want you to change the background color of the page body. So we'll start with that. So in CSS, remember, you need to be able to select for the element that you want to change the styles of. So the first thing is determine which element you want to change. So here it's saying change the page body. So which HTML element is the page body? It's that one, right? It's the one that has every other element inside of it, the body. So we want to select this element in our CSS. So the way to select, there's a few different ways to select in CSS, but I'm going to start by just the easiest, most basic one. Just write the name of the tag. So now any styles we put in here are going to select for that tag, the body tag. And the body tag, this is going to affect our whole page because everything is in the body. So I'm going to change the background color of that and change it to black. And there we go. Now our whole page is black. And we can't see the text anymore because the text is black too. Instead of changing it to black, I'm going to hover over this and I'm going to change it to like a nice gray. I am a big fan of dark mode, and so I'll be making my page dark mode probably. It's easier on the eyes. Okay, so we changed the background color of the body, default text color. So if you want to change everything, if you want to select, there's a selector that selects for all tags, every tag. So if there's something that you want to change on every single tag, I'll show you how to do that. So it's saying change the default text color. The way to change, we could say, we'll select H1, H2, anything that has text in it, we could do a selector for. But instead, I'm going to just do one selector that selects for everything and change the text color there. So the selector for everything is just that. it's a star, and it's called a star selector. And it's also that this is, you press Shift 8 to get that, at least on my keyboard. That it's the same as like the multiplication symbol, or it's called an asterisk. Asterisk, I think is how you pronounce it. So this encoding typically means it's what's called a wildcard, which basically just means everything, match everything. So it's like a catch-all. So every tag will now be selected with this. If I were to change any styles there, it'll change for all tags on the page. So I want to change the default text color for all text. So I'm going to say, or actually, there's no such thing as font color in CSS or text color. It's just color, because originally a web page was pretty much just text. So color was pretty much just by default text content. So I'm going to say color white. And now my text is white. So if I comment that out, which in CSS, this is what a comment looks like. You can do it by pressing Command and then the question mark key, which also is slash, backslash. The Command backslash is how you comment something in and out. So if I comment it out, it won't apply anymore, and we can see what that looks like. The text is black, which is hard to see on the black or dark background. Comment it back in, and now we can see it's, so if you have a dark background, you want light text. If you have a light background, you want dark text. You want some contrast between the text content and the background so that you can read it. Okay, so we changed the default text color. Customize, and like Alina was asking about, like one of these, like this bullet point seemed a little bit not very specific what they really wanted. That's how a lot of these are going to be. They're not very specific about what they want you to do. And the reason is because they're kind of leaving it up to you to decide what you want your page to look like. This is time for you to like have fun with it. And so they want to see that you've changed things, that you've done some CSS on these different elements. The actual values of those don't really matter. They just want to see that you've done that. So we changed the text color. It doesn't matter what we changed it to, but we changed it. Customize the font family. Okay. So again, the everything selector would be nice for font family. Because then we can change the font for the whole page. So font family is basically the same thing as just saying font. And for font family, I would probably use this, the autocomplete thing. You can try to write these out, but it's, you have to like learn which fonts are supported and which ones default computers have. And basically, to explain this, there's a font and then there's fallback fonts. So there's commas with fallback fonts, and they get more kind of broad and more widely supported. So if your computer doesn't happen to have a font called Courier New, then it'll look for a font called Courier. If it doesn't have that, then it'll just load whatever default font you have that is under the monospace category. So monospace fonts are, they're like what you see in code. So that's going to make it look like code now. But actually, I think I probably want, I like Roboto, so I'm going to choose Roboto. And I'm going to let it autofill, because one of these is Roboto, I think. Or maybe not. No. We do have Arial, which is all right. Verdana. Let's do Arial. Yeah. Okay, so that's my font family changed. Now add spacing between sections. Okay, so paddings and margins. So everything in CSS is, or everything like on a web page is content, there's no such thing as really like empty space. So every element of your web page is kind of like pushed up against each other, even if it doesn't visually look like it is. Like you can see Rio and about. Actually, I'm going to make my font size a little bigger just so you can see it better. I'll do font size 24 pixels. Or let's do 30. Actually, I think where I would want that is on the root. I'm not going to change the font size, actually. I'll zoom in. Okay. So yeah, on a web page, the way that things are placed in relation to each other, like the placement of everything, is not what you might think. You might think, oh, I maybe make a selector that's like move this thing, you know, over to the right or move it over down or move it to the left and everything just kind of, is free form. But it's actually like they're all laid out in like a blocky format. And you can actually see that by opening up your browser's dev tools. So if you right click on your page and do inspect, it'll open up this crazy thing. And this is all web pages do this. All web browsers do this. It's how you look at the actual internals of a web page. So I could do this on any web page. I could be on YouTube and open up your browser's dev tools. And basically what it is it's for programmers to see kind of what's going on. It helps you understand your web page. So I'm going to open up my dev tools. And again, that's inspect, right click inspect. There's a few different ways to open it, but this allows you to actually see the HTML content. So you can see this is my HTML here under the Elements tab. And when you hover over them, it actually shows you their dimensions. So Rio is up here, and the blue part is the content inside, the actual content itself. The orange part, and it might look different if you're on a different, like if you're on Safari or Edge or whatever different web browser, this this might work a little bit different, but I'm on Chrome and this is just what it looks like here. But the margins are in orange. So margins are like something around an element that space it out from the other elements around it. So the way that every element is laid out on a web page is that by default, most elements are going to take up the whole width of your web page. Like you can see this Rio tab or this H1 that has Rio in it, it's taking up the full width of my web page, even though the actual content is this small. And that is what's called a block. So there's a CSS property. You can actually see your CSS in here, by the way, and there's like default CSS for things. So one of the default CSS for an H1 is display block. So a lot of elements in CSS are going to have display block by default. Remember, this is not CSS that I wrote. This is like comes default with that type of tag. So most HTML tags are going to be in display block by default. And the block display means they're going to lay on top of each other and cover, like take up the full width of your web page. And that's what makes it so that things are like ordered top to bottom. So one after the other, top to bottom. The things get laid out that way because they're automatically taking up the full width and nothing else can sit beside it. So if I were to put two H1s next to each other, like in HTML, they couldn't sit next to each other on the page because they're automatically taking up the full width. So it pushes the other one down. If you switch it to display inline, which I could add a new style here, which, by the way, you can write CSS in here, which is really cool. I'm not going to go too deep into dev tools, but check them out because they're really helpful. If I did display inline, we can now see this is the size of this element now. It's only taking up that small part right there. It's not taking up the full width. And it's not yet having the effect where like something can go beside it, and it's because the element below it is also taking up the full width. And so this still can't go beside it because it's taking up the full width. So if I take that element under it and I say display inline, now they can go side by side. Because both of these elements now, Rio and about, which again, before they were stacked on top of each other, now they can be beside each other because they're not in block format, which lays them on top of each other, taking up the full width. They're in inline format, which means they can take up any width that is necessary, and then they'll automatically go side by side. So that is kind of important in CSS, is to understand every HTML element is either in display block or display inline. There's also one more called display flex, and you'll be learning about that. That's like the whole topic of next week, is flex and flex boxes. But really, the reason I'm going over this is because in CSS, the most confusing thing isn't how to style, like change the color of your text or change the size of your text or the font family or any of that. Those are all pretty easy. The most confusing thing is figuring out how to get things to sit where you want them on the page. That is like notoriously hard. Everyone struggles with it. Like if I wanted my name, Rio, to be in the middle of my page, it's kind of complicated to do. With Flexbox, it's easier, but Flexbox is a whole thing, and it comes with its own like set of complications. But just know that like positioning your elements on the web page is the main thing you're going to have to learn in CSS, is how to get things to sit where you want them to. And the most fundamental thing to understanding that is knowing that by default, things are going to squish together. But if they're displayed block, which is most elements by default, they're going to sit on top of each other. If they're display inline, they can sit side by side. And so you can change something to display inline if you want it to go side by side. There's other better ways to do it, probably like Flexbox is generally what you're going to use. But also with the CSS or with the dev tools open, I can click on this little guy right here. It's an icon, select an element in the page to inspect it. It's a little small, but hopefully you can see it. Click on that if you want, and you can actually hover over things and see their like space that they fill up. And you can see what elements they are. And so this is really helpful for getting like some intuition on how things are spaced on a web page. So the H1, because I set it to display inline now, it's taking up that small box up there. Same thing with about. This whole thing is the body tag. Next, we have hello, which again, the blue is the content inside of it, and the orange is the margins, which pushes elements away from each other. And by default, a lot of elements have like margins already. So these have margins, the orange stuff, which pushes elements apart from each other. The UL, so this is the unordered list here. This is the container that holds these items in here, these list items. So the UL has margins on the top and bottom. The content, which the content is these list items inside. And then the green part is actually what's called padding. So if I click on that, it'll select it in here. You can also just select it in here. If I open this panel over here, it's showing this box. And this box is, it has different layers to it. So there's the outermost layer called margin. And you can see it's showing the top and bottom margin, which are both 16. And I could actually change that if I wanted. I could change it to, 32. And all of a sudden there's a larger margin on the top if I move this down, we can see how the orange on the top is now, so it's pushing this element down from the top because I added a larger margin. So margins are a great way to space your elements out. So every element has a margin. Some of them have a margin that's 0, but they still have a margin. It's just the value, the actual dimensions of your margin are 0. They all have a margin top, margin bottom, margin left, and margin right. And then the same thing for border. Every element has a border. The values might be 0. So the values are zeroed out and there is no border now. But you can add a border and yeah, so the margin goes outside the border. The border is kind of the outside of the actual element itself. Padding, which most elements or a lot of elements don't have padding by default, but you can see this UL, this unordered list, does have padding by default. And the padding it has is only on the left. You can see it is green showing up there. That padding is similar to a margin. It's going to push certain parts of like certain content around. The padding goes inside the element itself, and it pushes the like children of the element around, whereas the margin spaces the actual element out from its elements around it. So margin is for pushing an element around in reference to the elements around it. Padding is spacing between like the outside of the element and its content. And then there's the content inside. So any elements inside are going to take up this content on the very inside. And so there's these layers here. And what this is called is the CSS box model. So you might want to write that down. CSS box model. So it's this model where like the way that CSS is designed is that or the way HTML and like anything rendering on a website, they have this same box that decides the size of everything and the spacing of everything. And everything on the website, for the most part, the position that it's at in the website is dependent on its box model and the box model of the elements around it. So if you want to space out an element, you probably, like if you want to change the position of it, you probably want to think about its margin, its padding, pretty much its margin and its padding. That's the main way that you space elements out from each other. So margin spaces an element out from the elements around it. Padding is the contents inside, how much distance there is from the content inside and the actual element itself. And okay, so that's a lot of theory. There's other ways to place things differently. Like you can use, these are the most common ways of like kind of the elements are spaced out from each other. There's one other way that I can show you really quick because you're going to see it sometimes. If I were to take H2, I could do transform, translate, and I could translate the X or Y position. So I could do translate X, which is the X axis, so left to right, Y axis is up and down. So I can do transform, translate X, 100 pixels. And now any H2s, you can see, which we only have one. This experience thing is now translated on the page. And I can show you, like if I go to the selectors here, it's still taking up the full width of the page. Its margins and padding haven't changed. It's just the original position that it was at is now translated. It's now like shifted over. That's one way you can space things. But the thing about doing this is other elements aren't going to make room for it by default. So if I were to translate Y, now it overflows over the element below it. And so if we were using translate for all the like spacing of everything, the position of everything, There's some big problems with that. One of the main ones is that we want things to not overlap, and so having margins and padding means everything is like aware of the things around it and being pressed up against them, or pressed up against like the margin and padding. And if you do translate, then all of a sudden you can have things just spaced wherever you want. And there's use cases for this. There's times where it's useful, but for the most part, you want to space things using margins and padding. And that's kind of the main skill that you'll learn with CSS as you do it more. And I just refreshed my page. I had made some changes in my dev tools here. Those changes aren't going to persist. They're not in my actual CSS here. They were only in the version that's on my website, like in my browser. And so I refreshed my page and now that's gone. I had set, if you remember, I set Rio and About to be both inline, so they were next to each other. So I just refreshed my page and now they're not, because I wanted to reset that. Okay, that was a lot of theory. That's the CSS box model. So if I want, just to kind of put it into practice, if I wanted the About section to be further below Rio, or say I want Rio to be like a little bit more towards the center and further down, I'll do a selector for it. So I'll check my HTML, I'll see, okay, Rio is an H1, so I need to make a selector for H1 tags. H1. And what do I want to do? Well, I want to push this element down. And the way to push it down is using margins and padding. For this case, and for most cases, a lot of cases, you're going to want to use margin. There's no content inside of here that we're trying to push around. We're trying to push around the element itself. So we want the top margin of this, that orange part on the top, to be bigger. So I'm going to say margin top it was 21, and now I'm going to make it 40 pixels. And you can see now it's moved down a little bit, not a ton, but if I hover over it, we can now see the margin is 40 on top. So that's how you can push things around. And I could say margin left. So that's like bumping it over to the left, or to the right, because there's more space on the left now. Okay, so that's kind of margins and padding. That's how you push things around. Let's jump back into the assignment here. So you want to add spacing, which is paddings and margins between sections. I think you had actual like sections in your HTML, huh? You had like section tags like that. I think you had like an ID that's about. I think you had something like this, where you have a section and then you have the H2 and then the content inside. So I'm going to do something like that. I'm going to make section tags. One thing that's really useful in HTML and CSS is, because of the like box model, because of the weird way of how everything's kind of laid out and spaced on a page, sometimes you want HTML. A lot of times you'll end up with HTML where the element itself isn't really adding any content. It's just a wrapper for some other content. And wrapping other elements, like wrapping some elements in another element, makes it easy to select that parent element that's wrapping them and move that parent element around so that you can change kind of how everything's spaced inside. If everything on your web page was just like only the content itself, it would be harder to have like an intuition about where everything should be spaced and laid out, and like, so wrapping sections and other sections is pretty common, even if those sections don't seem to add any content. They're helpful for spacing and other things too. They're helpful for adding styles. Like we could add styles to this section right here, and we could style everything inside of it. Like we could do a CSS selector that says, hey, everything inside this section, I want you to be like a certain color or something. So that's one thing that's useful for. And if I were to go to like an actual, like say I'm on GitHub, or let's go to a more common site. Let's go to like YouTube. Okay. I'm on YouTube. I can actually open up this, my DevTools here and inspect the elements in the same way. And you can see if I like, look, we have a div, a div, a div, a div, whatever these things are, YouTube. These are custom tags from YouTube. But you can see we have so many tags that are, a div is basically like a content wrapper. It wraps content. You can see we have hundreds of tags all leading up to just some text right here. And this text, you can see how many different elements I'm selecting over that still look like they're just selecting the text. And the reason is because like a lot of web pages are like this, and it's because there's a lot of tags that go into styling and like kind of shifting things around. And the actual content itself might be deeply nested in a bunch of like parent containers. So just so you know, it's pretty common and useful using CSS to select or to wrap content so that it's easier to select and move around and change background colors and stuff. Like for example, this, we could imagine all these items here, which these are probably list items in an unordered list, these links here. If I scroll, maybe not. Yeah, looks like they're not. But all these list items here, they can be like all the same size and all fit in this kind of section here because there's probably a wrapper. It's probably some sort of section, and you can see it right there. It's showing up. That's a section that kind of wraps all that content inside and helps you just make sure that everything is like spaced out right. So, okay. Sorry, I go on tangents a lot. I get excited about talking about this stuff. So, okay, I'll try to get back on track. So, we want to add spacing, padding, and margin between sections. So I just added these sections here about an experience. So I'm going to do a tag, or I'm going to do a CSS selector for section tags. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to say section, and I'm going to space these sections out with some margin top, probably. You can also just do margin like that, and then it applies the margin for all. Like if I check now at a section, let's see, section right there, we can see the margin is 4 on the top, bottom, left, and right. 4 pixels. Do 40. Now it's all sides. There's some shorthand for margin. You can also do 2 things in a row, like 40 and 20. That'll say, okay, I want the first one to be the top and bottom, and the second one to be left and right. You can even do up to, you can do 3 and you can do 4. These are all shorthand ways where each number is going to correlate to a specific top, bottom, left, or right. And depending on how many numbers you have, it's going to be a certain different subset of them. You can look into shorthand for margin and padding, and lots of other elements have like a shorthand. That way you don't have to write margin top, 40, margin bottom, 40, or like you could just have one selector that changes them. But I'm going to keep it simple. I don't want to use the shorthand. I'll use more explicit, just margin top 40. So now each section has a little bit more padding. Yeah. That orange, we just added that to space these sections out a little more. Okay. Padding. Yeah, let's add some padding too. So one thing that's nice, like I'll give you a little guide on how to make your website look nicer. Most websites, by default, if you don't have any styling, your text is going to be pretty close to the side. It's going to be like really pushed up against the sides of your page. And that just is like, it immediately makes your page look more like amateur. So one of the like best ways to make your page look more professional is keep text from pushing up right up against the side, unless it makes sense to do that. But for the most part, sometimes what I like to do is I just take the body and I put like padding on the body, which remember padding affects the elements inside and everything's inside the body. So that'll actually, if I do padding, let's do 24 pixels. Now everything is pushed out a little bit. And most websites are not going to have their text like right up against the side. If I were to go to like, let's go to medium.com, you can see their text is like kind of in the middle. And even if I make the website really small, there's still some padding between things, making it so that nothing's ever pushed right up against the side usually. And the bigger your web page is, the more it's going to be spaced out from the sides. Also, another tip, don't have your text go too wide. It's harder to read text if it's taking up too much width. So if you look at most websites, you'll start to notice most of them have a certain width for their text that's like the maximum width, and you won't see text that's wider than that. It's easier to read. If you're trying to read and the text spans like a very wide screen, it's harder to read. So just another tip. And a way to achieve that is anything that has text in it, like a section, you could put like a max width on it. Max width. And you can do the max width. There's even this fancy thing of like CH, which is the characters, the width of a character. So we could do like 200 CH. And to be honest, I only recently learned about this one. But that maxes something out at a certain character width based on the width that your characters are. So let's see, 100. Oh, where's my sections? Here it is. Maybe that's too much, 20. There it is. Okay. So now you can see my section is being limited on how wide it is, and all the content inside will also be limited to the width of that section. And I'm saying I want the section to have a max width of 20 characters. And obviously that will depend on the size of the characters. So if your font inside is different, I think CH refers to the root font size. But anyways, don't worry about it. I've never used CH in reality. Most people like just don't worry about it for now. But that is something you can explore if you want. Okay, so we added some padding and margin between sections. We added padding top to the section. We added padding to the body to keep things from being pressed right up against the sides. Now let's change the alignment of the content of one of your sections. Alignment of content. Like text align, maybe? Yeah, that's probably what they mean. Okay, so you can do something called text align. And that, just like if you're like in Microsoft Word or something, you can make your text in the like centered or on the left or on the right or justified. So you have those same things here. So we could do text align center. It looks bad, but we now have all of our text centered. And although it does look bad right now, I do like a page that has centered text, so I'm gonna maybe make it look a little better. One way to do that is let's have first of all, Rio is not centered, so I want to make that centered. I'm going to make a selector for the H1. I'm going to do text align center. So this is centering my heading now. So now everything's centered. The bullet points are looking bad. So I'm actually going to change those. You can get rid of bullet points. This is a very common thing. You'll have to look it up if you forget, which you'll probably forget because I always do. I've had to look it up a million times. How do I get rid of bullet points on an unordered list? Because I use unordered lists a lot, and a lot of times I don't actually want the bullet points there. The way to do it is you do list style none. It's not very intuitive. You'd hope that it would be like show bullet points. No, but that's what it is. List style none. The reason is because you can change it to like you could even do a number, I think. There you go. So now we have an unordered list. Remember when I was saying like, why don't you, like you can just change the style of any element. So why do you use specific elements? Right now we have an unordered list that looks like an ordered list because I changed the list style to decimal. And so don't do that. Don't have an unordered list that looks like an ordered list. Use an ordered list. And that, again, that's for screen readers. It's for people who are vision impaired and for Google's search engines to be able to index your site better. So yeah, try to use tags for what they're meant for, HTML tags, and don't just change the styling of one tag to look like another because that's going to be confusing for everyone. So yeah, list style to none, and now that looks a little better. We probably want the padding to be, one thing is it's sometimes hard to, like you can see right here, as I was saying, where it's hard to get things to show up where you want them to show up. Something doesn't look quite centered still about this, right? And what it is these items right here are not centered under experience. These items are off to the right a little bit. And you can see if you go to your thing and you highlight over, click that, highlight over, there it is. That green, that padding right there is pushing these things off to the side a little bit. Even though it's way over there, it's confusing why that, you could spend an hour trying to debug, trying to figure out why. So just welcome to the world of CSS. If you really get into it, that's what you'll do. But one thing that can be really helpful to like diagnose things like that is if you do an everything selector, if you do border 1 pixel solid red, we're adding a 1 pixel solid red border to everything. I'll save. Look at that. So this obviously doesn't look great. It looks kind of cool, but it, the reason I'm doing this is it helps us see the actual element. It makes a border around every single element. So now we can see all the elements, even if the element itself is like invisible. Like, we have a UL, this unordered list. This element itself is not, there's no like visual indication of where it starts and ends and where it's placed and everything. The only thing we can see is the content inside of it. But now we've added a border to everything. So we can see the unordered list. Well, it's right here. And we can see this block right here. So if I were to put that border on everything, I could easily see, oh, there's this block right here for some reason, and that's pushing everything here. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to say padding is 0. And now everything's centered. So I got rid of the padding there. There's another thing you can do. You can add a background color. Let's do red, but then let's say make it more transparent. And that helps even more because you can see how many elements are overlapping with each other. So the darker red it is, the more elements are overlapping. So like these list items, the background is pretty red, and it's because they're inside this section and also inside the unordered list, which is right there. So these are hacks for debugging in CSS. It's not technically debugging. Debugging is like its own thing, but people would call it debugging in CSS. It's a way to figure out where everything is and why it's taking up the space that it is. And it's nice to do that. You do a CSS selector on everything. Usually you'll just see this border one. Like this is pretty common. You'll see people do this border one. This background color one isn't quite as common, but it's also useful. And the nice thing about it is you have that and you can comment it out. So you just leave it commented out, and then if you're ever like, why is that thing appearing where I want it to? Comment it in, look at everything, figure it out, comment it back out. Okay, so we did that. We made everything centered. Let's keep going. We changed the alignment and content of one of your sections. We could do it in one. We could do it in all. Actually, let's just do it in one. Or now that we did it in all, let's change it in one. It'll look bad, but I'll show you how to do it. If we want to select just one section. So now we're going to learn about another thing in CSS, which is so far we've only done selectors that select everything that is that type of tag. So this is going to select all H1s. This is going to select all sections. How do we just select one section, a specific section? Maybe I'm bad about our audience participation, but yeah, let me know. Lima?
Yeah, I think we can use the ID to select the section.
Exactly. So this section, what makes it unique from the others is it has an ID that's different from the others. So we can use that to select it. And can you tell me what I would write here?
What section was to experience? We can say like dash a hashtag and then put the yeah.
Yep. Good job. That's exactly what we do. So the hashtag there is the selector for ID. So if you don't have that hashtag at the beginning, we're selecting a tag called experience, which we don't have any tags called experience. We do have a tag that has an ID of experience. And so the hashtag says, select the thing that has the ID that matches this. So exactly right. Now we're matching, and you can actually hover over it and see it says element ID equals experience. So element, this is just a generic thing. This is saying this matches any element that has an ID of experience. And so now if I were to change this, if I were to do like text align left, now our experience section, the text is aligned to the left. So this is selecting a section by ID, or let's just say an element, because it doesn't have to be a section. Any element can have an ID, and you can select it by the ID. And while I'm there, I might as well show you there's one more class. So I could do a class that's, I don't know. I want to make this not just arbitrary. I want to make it like actually useful. So let's do a class on this. Class on the main thing. This is going to be title. Title text, how about? So my title text is a class. So just like we have ID equals experience, we have class. So it's basically, in this sense, it's really the same thing. You can select by ID or you can select by class. The way to select by class is, who knows how to select by class? I kind of just gave it away, but it's a dot. So that's how you select by class. You do a dot. The hashtag is ID, dot is class. So I could say font. Let's do font style. Strike through. I think we could do that, right? Wait, what is font style again? Oh yeah, italic. Okay. So now we can see my title is italic. I selected by class. So this is selecting by ID. This is selecting by class. And they're basically the same thing. It doesn't really matter which one you use. Most people use classes. An ID, technically, you can only have one element with the same ID. So an ID is more useful if you want to select a single element. Classes are useful if you want multiple elements to have that same class. So I could have multiple things with the title text class. And you could do it, there's a type of class that you can do called a utility class. So I'll show you how to do that. So I could make a class right here called, or I'll assign this a class called blue. Now I'm going to make a class in here called, or class selector called blue. And I'm going to say color, sorry, I have this thing showing up, color blue. So now we have a class called blue. And, sometimes you might want the class or the ID or whatever to explain what the content is, but sometimes you might want a class that just describes what the content looks like. So you could have one that's blue. You could have another class that's like big. And you could have font size, 100 pixels. So now we could have this blue, and then we can add another class to it by doing a space, big. So now Rio is blue and big. And I could even add this to another thing. About has an ID and a class, and the class is blue and big. The reason it's not showing up blue, I assume, is because I set why is it not? Oh, it's because it's applying to the section, and the section has this text inside of it. So I guess that's a good moment to talk about, or good segue into hierarchy and how CSS selectors kind of override each other, like priority and the kind of cascading part of cascading style sheets. So far, we pretty much have mostly just done one selector for one element. Besides this, blue and big. And now this is leading us into something where we have this section has blue and big, but the text inside of it is not blue. It's just big. So what's going on there? Well, there's this thing in CSS called, I guess, I don't know, what is it called? Selector specificity. I think that's what it is. Yeah, that's what it would be. And a lot of times when you're looking stuff up, you'll see MDN or you'll see W3 schools. MDN is like the more comprehensive. W3 schools is a little bit more user-friendly for beginners. So I would generally click on W3 schools unless you're like into like getting the nitty-gritty. Like W3 or MDN is going to be like a lot. The W3 schools, it's a little bit more like user-friendly. There's not going to be too much stuff going on, and yours is going to look a little different. I have dark theme on, so you could have light. Okay, so this is the specificity hierarchy. So every CSS selector, this is basically how one style can override other styles. So certain ones have priority over other ones. So if you have multiple selectors that kind of cover a single element, the specificity of that selector is going to change which one affects it. And so, sorry, I might not be done, or I might not be explaining that well. I'll show you really quick because this might help. Here I have blue and big, which technically is going to, because I have these classes, blue and big, that's going to apply those styles to this section and the content inside of it. And the content inside of it is not showing up as blue, even though it has that selector that's trying to set its color to blue. So why isn't it being set to blue? Even though Rio is being set to blue. Well, my intuition, which I'm going to have to double check this, but my intuition is that it has to do with specificity. It has to do with there must be a selector that's more specifically targeting these elements. This one is kind of like oh, it's on the parent. It's a class. So there's a class on the parent element, and that style should cascade down onto these. Why would they not be showing up as blue? Because there's another style that is overriding that. It's more specific. So, whereas blue does apply to these, there's another style that's actually being applied more specifically, and it would be this one. It's this top one. So this selector for everything that's setting the color of everything to white. This is actually going, okay, you have these things here. The color of them is being set to white, even though it's being set to blue here, because I can't remember if it's because it's on the parent or because it's a class selector. Actually, it would be because it's a parent, I think. So this style that's setting the color of that text to white is overriding the blue. And we could actually see that. We could double check. We could open up the dev tools and see why that's happening. I could open this and we could see right here. Move this over. And you can see it right here too. So we have blue and there's a strike through on that. And I think it might tell me why the strike through is there. Maybe not. But we have this everything selector that's actually setting the color to white. So we have one thing setting the color to blue, another thing setting the color to white. This one is taking precedence. So this one is overriding the fact that we set the color to blue. And if I go over here, I can drop down color, white, and blue, and I can see white is actually on top. And I think that's, and then there's a selector here. It's really hard to see, but if I zoom in here, you can see this star right here. That's the everything selector. And then blue is that. And so because the style is being applied to the parent, it will be applied to the children inside, but the children are actually being selected by the everything selector, which takes precedence. So it's setting the color to white. So selector specificity, basically there's an order in which the styles can override each other. And the styles that take the highest precedence are inline styles. So when I said for example, my main text Rio here is blue and big. If I did an inline style, like style equals color red, there we go. So color red being applied as an inline style is actually overriding the style being applied by blue, the class. And the reason is because of right here. Inline styles have the highest priority. So they will override all other styles applied to an element. So the highest priority directly applied with the style attribute. ID selectors take priority over class selectors. So if I had an ID selector on this H1, like ID equals heading text or something. If I were to set a selector to select by ID, by heading text, it would override styles that are applied here if they're overlapping. So selecting by ID takes precedence over selecting by class. Styles applied here, if they're the same styles as the ones applied in the class selector, the styles in the ID selector will actually take precedence. And that makes sense because you want to be able to for example, you want to be able to if I wanted, I could apply some styles to the body, and then I still might want to change styles that are inside the actual elements here and have it override the styles on the body. So it basically means you can say catch-all styles go on the body, and then more specific ones can override those. It's useful for being able to do that. So Classes come next. So inline type takes highest priority, and that will override other ones. Then ID, then classes, then attributes. So you can actually select by attribute, which don't worry about it. And then elements and pseudo elements, which also don't worry about pseudo elements really. But elements are the lowest priority. So if I apply styles using a class, those will take precedence over styles applied to an element itself. So I could apply, and actually we can see that here because we have a section, we have an element selector for section that's applying text align center. And then we have another one for experience, which remember experience is a section right here. So there's two selectors being applied to this. There's a section selector, and then there's the experience selector. But the experience selector is selecting by ID, and so the text align here, because it's selecting by ID, are going to override the text align there. So the final text align is going to be left, even though we have a selector applying center because of selector hierarchy or specificity or whatever. So something to know about if you're trying to change something and it's not changing, it's probably because there's another thing overriding that style. Okay, I'm going to get rid of blue and big. Okay, this is getting long, and I was intending to only go for, or I always tend to go long, by the way, but intending on only going for maybe 2 hours. We haven't gotten to any games yet, and so I know my portfolio doesn't look amazing yet, but I think we talked about some important things, so hopefully you got some good things out of it. There's so much to cover, so let's see. I think I covered some of the most important things. So ways to add CSS, inline, internal, and external style sheet. This is the one that we're using, external style sheet. There's selectors. So you can select by element, select by class, or select by ID. And remember, the selectors will look different depending. So an element selector is just like this. You type the name of the element and then the brackets and then the styles inside. A class selector looks like this. You have a period and then the name of the class, and then the ID selector is the hashtag. We have the box model, which the box model is basically how things are spaced. Oh. So it's basically the distance between everything and how they're kind of pushing each other around on the page. So you have margin, border, padding, and content. And everything on a web page generally is going to have these same properties. If you do display inline, that changes it. So you can have different display types. Yeah, so you can have block, which is the default, inline, which is going to put things side by side. There is inline block, which an inline element, a block element you can actually size using. So the size of a block element will be based on the content inside of it, but you can also size it based on, I'm going to add a background color to the sections so that we can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so these are the sections. Tone that down a bit. Okay, so these are the sections, and I can actually add a height to them. So like height 200 pixels, and now they're taller. So the height will be by default the content inside of it. It'll hug the content inside. If you want, you can explicitly set the height, which will mean, either the content can overflow. So like now the content's overflowing. So the section itself is only this tall, but the content inside is going to overflow and it's going to make all the spacing weird. You can make the height of something way bigger. So you can set a height and width on elements. And that's useful to know. You're definitely going to use height and width a lot. And min height and max height and min width and max width are also important. But the reason I'm bringing those up is because you have block and inline block, and a block element, you can set the height and width, an inline element you can't. So inline block actually is an element that you can set the height and width still. It's going to be side by side, but you can still set the height and width. By the way, the most common elements that are inline by default are text, like not headings, but paragraph text. So paragraph text, the words go side by side, and the reason they are side by side is because they're inline to each other. Not multiple paragraphs though. Like if I did multiple hello paragraphs right here, they'll all be, so that's still block. They're still taking up the full width of their container, which I was saying, block elements are the width of the web page. In reality, they're the width of their enclosing container. And so before I was showing you the enclosing container was the width of the web page. Now they're in an enclosing container, which is this section, which has a max width or a width set. So they're just going to take up the full width of the section they're inside, which they're going to be over each other. If I wanted, I could, but the actual letters themselves are side by side, and the reason is because their display is set to inline by default. If I were to change all these paragraphs, or let's see, if I were to have a paragraph, or let's see, if I were to do a span, so a span is, sorry, I feel like I'm jumping all over the place. When I learned about display block versus display inline, one of the most helpful things was to learn there's something called a div, which this is just like a container. It stands for divider, but people use it for just containing elements. It's like a generic container. Span is the same thing. It's a generic container, but the only difference is a span, the display is inline. So when you're separating text, like if you want to say, my name is, then we could do a span Rio and set the style to bold. Oh, sorry. Font weight. Font weight bold. Okay, so it's pretty subtle, but Rio is now in a span, which has a specific style to it. But the reason it's in a separate element, even though my name is, and then there's another element here, the span is actually going to sit side by side with whatever's outside of it because spans are inline by default. If I were to set this to a div, now it's going to be underneath. And the reason is that display thing, display inline versus display block. So inline means next to each other, block means, yeah. Okay. Trying to just summarize what I talked about. Let's do a game. What do you think? I know, and you guys can feel free to leave at any point. I know we're it's a lot, but let's play a game. Yeah, feel free to leave or stick around. I understand not everyone has tons of time, but I figure that was a good crash course. It was dense, it was a lot, but let's end it off by playing this game a little bit. Also, I'll pause for questions or just if anyone has any questions or comments or concerns or anything.
I have 2 questions about the classes we had. The first question is that you mentioned when we move some elements that they overlap the other elements. should we use margin to move the elements or to not overlap each other, or there's another solution? Because when you use transition X or Y, that element overlap on another elements, and when you use the margin, they didn't overlap. So that question, I want to know what should we use to avoid that overlapping other elements. And another question is that when we want to inspect the page, how to know which code is like for default style and which code is written by a developer.
Good questions. Okay, I'm not sure I fully understand the first question. You said, how do we make sure the elements don't overlap, right? Use margin. So margin makes it so that elements will push each other around. So if one element is like has a bigger margin, the elements around it will like be pushed out by that margin. If you use transform translate, then you're potentially going to make like elements won't adjust automatically in relation to each other. So yeah, use margins and your elements should never like really overlap with each other. Does that,
Yeah,
did I
yeah.
answer?
I just want to know how to avoid overlapping the elements. So yeah, and another question about the inspect.
Yep. Okay, so the way to tell the difference when you're inspecting whether you applied the styles or they're applied by default, the way that I've always known is, and I don't know if this is the best way to know, but this is just the way that I do it. If you, so when you open it up, first of all, there's all these tabs on the top, so make sure you're on elements. And then elements will be right here, but then there's also these other things in here. So this is styles, and then this is like your style panel. So this right here under styles, this has a list of your actual CSS style or like CSS selectors and those styles. And each one of these blocks should be its own like selector. If you look right here, that says index.css, index.css. This one says user agent style sheet. This one says injected style sheet. So basically, where these styles come from is right here. And if it's from user agent style sheet, that is default. If it's from index.css or any other file that you remember making, then you put that there. So any styles that you didn't apply yourself will probably be user agent style sheet. And it looks like there's some other like distinguishers, like the text here is italic and the text here, it's all italic. So maybe that's a good way to tell. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yep. Okay, looks like I had another question. Let me.
I sent you a question.
Okay, yep. Okay, so I got okay, Marvin has to leave. That's fine. Thanks for being here. Okay, and from Lillian, a question, tried to submit my assignment. Did not check out and pulled lesson 7 instead of 8. How do I fix it? I might try to help you with that at another point.
Please, ask
Yeah.
to submit it tomorrow. I mean, Tuesday. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Dealing with Git stuff can sometimes like be, it can sometimes like turn into a whole thing where it's like hours of debugging. So I'll try to help you with that. If you Slack me after this, I'll try to help you with that.
Oh, okay. Oh, you wanted me to share the screen?
Well, I was hoping we could just while I'm giving this lecture, I would just finish off this lecture and then if you send me a Slack message afterwards, then I'll try to help you with that. So after this session.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Because I don't know if redo it, rebring it. I don't have idea how to.
Yeah. I would get into it with you, but like doing Git stuff, in my experience, it tends to be just like sometimes it can turn into like an hour of trying to figure things out. And I think it would be most useful for the other people here to
Okay. I'll
finish off
send
this
it to you.
lecture.
Okay.
Okay. Um, okay. Does that answer your questions, Lima? Cool.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Um, okay, I think we have some time for just a little bit of, I'll play this game for maybe 15 minutes and then I can take off. So, okay, so this is a game that I found. I looked up CSS games and I found this article and it mentioned one called CSS Diner. So I bet if you were to look up CSS Diner, you can find it. Yep. So that's what we're going to be playing, CSS Diner, and I'll just play it for a sec. Oh, also, I want to mention, I'll drop this in the comments here in the chat. I'm a big fan of um, cheat sheets, CSS cheat sheet. So you can just look this up online, but I also just sent a link to it in the chat. And I'll probably post it on Slack too. This is just, I mean, it looks kind of crazy, but like if you really take a minute, it kind of just sections off different like things to know in CSS and shows you um, important things to know. Like here's all the selectors right here. Um, and properties, these are different CSS properties you can use. Background, there's actually some cool things like you can make like a shadow. If you want to make a shadow, you can make this here, make the shadow, and then copy the style right here and paste that. So you don't have to make the style by typing it out. You can actually make it in here. So yeah, style sheet or CSS cheat sheet. It's good to have in your back pocket. Okay, so let's play some CSS Diner. So you're learning, which I haven't really played this before. I just found it, so we're gonna figure it out together. I did walk through the first thing just to understand how it works. So what it starts off is you want to do selectors. So we're learning selectors now. How do you select different elements? So it has these fake HTML tags here called plates. So we're imagining we want to select these plates here. And so we type our CSS and it says select the plates. So I'm going to type plate. And before I did like a whole like open and closing and I tried to write some CSS, but it didn't like that. So it wants us to just write plate apparently. So I wrote plate and we completed that. So now we're on lesson or level 2. And maybe I'll get some audience participation. So now it wants us to select the bento boxes. And this is now the CSS here. We have bento, plate, bento. So does anyone know what the CSS selector would be to select the bento boxes?
I think should be bento because we have the bento element and doesn't have any ID or class.
Yep, exactly. Okay, great job. Okay, select the fancy plate. Okay, so, and if I can zoom in, if that's helpful here. Let's see, maybe can I get rid of this menu here? Maybe not. Okay, so, yeah, okay. Select the fancy plate. So we have a plate with an ID of fancy. Does anyone know how we could select that?
Yeah, I think we use hashtag and then the fancy
Yep,
ID name.
exactly. Yep, this is now going to say, even though it's a plate, it has an ID of fancy, and I'm going to select by the ID. You could select by plate. You can also select by fancy. If you only want to select that fancy plate, then you want to do this. Otherwise, you could just do plate and that selects all plates. So this is like a more specific one that only targets that one. So got that. All right, next one, apple. How could we select the apple? Oh, wait, apple on the plate. Okay, this is getting a little trickier. I don't think I covered how to do these ones, but this is now a selector where we need to say, I don't want to select this apple. This apple is not on the plate. This apple is on the plate. It doesn't have an ID or a class. How do we select only the apple that's on the plate and not this other apple?
I think we put the plate and then beside that the apple. Like that, I think. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, let's try it. Yeah, okay, that worked. Great job. I forgot how to do that one. Sometimes I have to look these things up. But yeah, good job. Okay. Um, select the pickle on the fancy plate. Awesome. Okay. So we have like a orange, don't want that. We have a plate, we have a pickle, we have a fancy plate with a pickle.
I can jump in because the others I don't know that. Okay, we can use the ID fancy, like hashtag fancy, and then put the second because it's inside the uh, plate that has the fancy ID. So hashtag fancy, and then beside that we put a pickle.
Yep. Okay. I'll try it. I think that's it. Yep. Nice. Oh, and they are giving us some instructions here. So let's see what those last ones said. Descendant selector. So that first one that kind of stumped me, it was apple inside the plate. It says if you say one class or one selector and then space and then the other selector, it selects all B inside of A. So all of the second thing inside the first thing, aka all apples inside of plate. And then this same thing, you do the ID. Okay, so let's do this next one. It's kind of teaching us things here. So the class selector. So we just want to select things that are small apples.
Um, Here, I think we only put we use the class that's small. So we have
Yeah, I
this.
think so too, because we only want small apples,
Yeah.
but
Um.
only apples are the things that are small.
Yeah.
So if we do small, then it will get only apples.
Yeah. I have a question. Like, if we have an element inside the a div, but that element has a class or uh, an ID. So do we need to use that like for that div and then like that and use the class, or we can use only like we can use directly the ID or the class? Did you get my question? Like, if we have a div and inside that div we have elements, and we need to select that element which has ID or class. Do we need to put like div and then use the ID or class, or we can
Nope.
use just
Yeah, you can
ID?
directly
Okay.
select something by the ID.
Okay.
And one nice thing about IDs is they should be it should be only one element with us, like they should be ID or unique between elements. So there should only be one thing on your page that has a certain ID. And so, yeah, you could have a million divs all nested inside each other with one single thing on the inside, and you could select that thing by ID or by anything. Like if you had, like if I had my HTML here, if I did like um oh, oh no, wait, that's not it. There's a way to do like times 20. Nah, that's not it. Well, okay, so we have a div, we have a div, and we have a div. And then we have a, let's go with, we could do a span, or let's do a unique one that we haven't seen before. Let's do article. And then we can do H1. By an article. So we can select article and it'll select the article even though it's nested in a bunch of things. So we could do article, color, or wait, because color is being applied to everything. So we could say, or actually that's a good one. So let's do color red. This shouldn't color the text inside because remember we have this everything selector that's overriding that. But if I did a more specific selector, I think I could do that. I could select the H1 inside the article. So I could do H1, but that selects all H1s. If I wanted to just select the H1 inside the article, I could do that.
Okay. And if the if H1 has an ID, we directly select that ID, right? We don't use the use the article right here.
Yeah, so I could do
Okay.
where are we? Article title by ID, and it works. And this is this deeply nested thing.
Okay.
So we can select that by ID. And then yeah, if you want, you can like be like, okay, I want all, like if it didn't have an ID, you could say, I want all H1s, or I don't want to select all H1s. I only want to select H1s that are inside this article. So this single element right here.
Okay.
That's the only element that applies. You can say article H1.
Thank you.
And you can actually hover over it and it'll show you. It says anything that's an article, dot, 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 which means any number of elements that are in between, it's fine. And then the H1. So any H1 that is a descendant of an article, no matter how many elements are in between. And then there's also one that's like this, which means it has to be an H1 that is a direct descendant of the article.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so we're doing small apples, and small should, because only apples are small, this should get all apples, I think. Let's try. Yep. Small oranges. So now we have apples and oranges that are both small. So let's do, if we just did, and remember dot, because it's a class, if we did dot small, that would select this apple, that orange, and that orange. We just want oranges though, so I'm going to do dot small and orange. We could also do orange space dot small. That would also work, I think. No. Never mind.
Can you like this Bento and then that small?
What was that?
Palette nose.
Because the big apple, there are big apples too. So you have to specify the small ones.
So the dot should be, oh, a dot class name. Okay, you can combine the class selector with other selectors like a type selector. I forgot about that. Okay, so we could do orange dot small. I think that's what we could do.
Okay.
I'll pull up my VS Code here and see what that would do. If I did like article dot blah, so we're imagining we have a class name called blah, and then hover over it, what would that look like? It would select all articles that have a class name of blah. So that would work, I think, because the important thing is that we want an apple that has a class name of small. And so the syntax is one selector dot and then another selector. And that says get all things that are of that type that have a class name of that type. And I think we could probably do that, which would do an ID there, right? Yeah. So all articles have an ID of blah. Okay. So we want orange dot small, which would take all oranges that have a class of small. Yep. Okay, select small oranges in the bentos. Orange class small, but it has, so we could do orange dot small, just like last time, where it should select all oranges that have a class name of small, but they have to be inside a bento.
Add bento at the beginning.
Yep, I think that should do it. And I can even, I'm liking going back and testing in VS Code. This is nice. So this would get anything that is an orange with a class name of small that is inside a bento. That should work. Yep. All right. We're probably not going to go through all 32, but we'll see. Combine selectors with commas. Select all plates and bentos. So plate, bento, plate. Okay, so we want all plates and bentos. And it's actually showing us here the comma combinator. A comma B. Thanks to, you can select all A and B elements. You can combine any selectors this way. You can specify more than two. Example, P comma dot fun selects all P elements as well as all elements that are. Okay, so the last few, we were kind of like getting more specific with our selectors. So one was kind of compounding on the other, so it had to have all those qualities. This is kind of selecting multiple things that can be unrelated if we want. So we could do like H1 comma H2, and that would select all H1s and H2s. So the comma is important for saying, I want multiple selectors that are kind of unrelated, but they are going to have the same styles. So we're about to describe some styles that apply to all those. So I think what we would do is, yeah,
Comma bento.
plate, comma, bento. Yep. Select all the things. Oh, and we learned about, I showed you this one. So the star selector, right? Selects everything. They call it the universal selector. P star selects any element inside all P elements. Oh, that's a good. There's so many things that it's like you can get by with CSS only knowing a few of these things, but you kind of just like learn a certain amount to get by, and then you just don't learn anymore usually, or you pick up a little bit occasionally. But that's a cool one to know, is that you do a tag and then the star selector. I never use that. But yeah, star should select everything. Okay. Everything on a plate. What do you guys think?
select my plate and then star.
Yep. Oh, okay. It's getting fancy. Okay, select an element that directly follows another element. Interesting. So every apple that's next to a plate. So we can see we have an apple. This apple is not next to a plate, I don't think, because it's in a bento that's next to a plate. I think we just want an apple that's next to a plate. So we would only want this apple and this apple, I assume. These two. So it has to be next to a plate. A plus B selects all B elements that directly follow A. So all apple that directly follows plate, I assume. Right? Because selects all of B, which B is the second here. So selects all of the second one, all apples that directly follow A, which is the first one, so plate. So all apples that directly follow a plate. I think that's what we'd want, right?
Yeah.
Because this apple is following a plate, this apple's following. Should I try it? Try it. Yep. Okay, we're getting to things that I never even really used, but this is fun. I'm learning too. Okay. The sibling, okay, general sibling selector. So this last one was adjacent sibling selector. This next one is general sibling selector. Selects all elements that follows another element. You can select all siblings of an element that follow it. This is like the adjacent selector, except it gets all the following elements instead of one. Okay. Select the pickles beside the bento. We have the bento, we have 2 pickles. So yeah, we probably want all pickles that are beside the bento. So bento, and then if we did plus pickle, that would select just this next pickle, I assume. But if we do that, which this key, I'm pretty sure is called the tilde key or tilde. I think. Let's see. Yep, cool. Okay. Select the apple directly on a plate. Okay, so this is one that I've actually used. This is like the child selector where it selects children of an element, but it's like the direct children only. So I'm thinking we want an apple that's directly on the plate. So there's only one apple that's a direct sibling of a plate. And so we do plate, that, which, what was
What we
that?
call that sign is a bigger, what
Oh, yep.
we call this?
It's a greater than sign, I think.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, apple.
Okay, so plate, greater than sign, apple. And I'm doing spaces. I think you don't need them. I think it's okay to have them though, right? Yeah, seems fine. Whoa. Okay. The top orange. Okay. I've seen this one. These are where it starts to get really crazy. First child. Selects the first child element inside another element. So we have the plate, and all these oranges are children of the plate, but we only want the first one. So first child. So it doesn't matter that it's an orange. it's just the first child of the plate. So we want plate, and then this, which these are, I forgot what that thing is. I think it's a pseudo selector. What it's called? Plate first child. Let's try that. Oh, nope. I got it wrong. What's wrong there? Selects all first child elements. Selects all first child P elements. Huh. I wonder what's wrong there. Is it that I need a space? I don't think so. Div P first child selects all first child P elements that are in a div. Okay, so you do have to specify the type of element. So it'd be plate orange first child. So it's the first orange inside a plate, if I'm following this logic here. Yep.
And sorry, what's the difference between the another one, the last one that we uh learned here? Not that one, the another one. Before that we had this one. What's the difference with that one? Is it
Yeah.
also
So this
like
one would select all apples,
okay,
but if there were multiple apples on this plate, it would select all of them.
okay,
This next one, there's multiple oranges, but it only selects the first one
go.
of that kind. That's a child of. So yeah, in HTML you hear about like the way they relate different elements is like parents, children, siblings, grandchildren, grandparents. It's
Yeah.
funny how they do that, but yeah, so these are children of the plate. This is the first
Okay.
child.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. I'm starting to feel like time is I'm starting to feel like I want to wrap this up. So yeah, I'm probably gonna end it there. But if any of y'all want to play this game, um, I'll link it. I'll send it in the chat. CSS Diner game. Definitely fun way to improve your CSS skills. And I think they move on to other things. Like if I go further in levels, oh, it's all about selectors. Yeah, it's all about selectors, it looks like. There's other games that are like next class you'll be doing Flexbox, or next week I think you'll be doing Flexbox Froggy. It's a similar game where you're choosing how to fit these frogs onto their lily pads. This is a really fun one. So just to give you a little sneak preview of how that would look. So we have the pond is a flex box, which a flex box helps you move content inside of it. So I'm gonna use justify content, flex end, and that moves the frog onto the lily pad. So it says this whole pond is a flex box. Flex end says move something to that. There's justify content, and then there's another one called align items, and that helps you space things at the top or middle or bottom or wherever inside this container. So that's Flexbox Froggy. You'll be learning Flexbox next week. Flexbox is really awesome for, like, so far today you've probably seen the ways to space things out seem a little rigid with just margin and padding. But Flexbox gives you a lot more flexibility, as the name implies, so you can kind of have things get spaced out like you'd want. Like if you look at my like browser right here, there's all this different, like all these items and stuff. If I were to like start shrinking it down, you can see these folders are starting to go away. Actually, let me move this over. So these folders are starting to go away right here as I'm shrinking it. This whole page, things are changing in size. Eventually they go on top of each other. So all these different things are like changing in response to the size of the window. Certain things disappear, certain things reappear. The tabs get larger, but then they reach a minimum size. So like at a certain point, they stop getting smaller. So any web page that you go on that like even Code the Dream, you start moving it around and like it seems like things are just like seamlessly resizing to look nice. It's Flexbox. Flexbox makes it really easy to like size things right. So that's what you'll be learning next week. Anyways, Flexbox Froggy, CSS Diner. I really like CSS, so some people hate it. It's really hard, but it just takes a while to, it's like intuitive how you might want your web page to look, but it's really hard to actually do what you want it to do. So, but you're all doing it. I'm proud of you all for being here. Thank you for joining my session. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sending
And I'll
you
be
the-
on Slack if any of you,
Yeah,
need
I will
anything.
send you the information.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you all.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a great day.
You too.